Has the Obama administration's obsession with green energy pushed us into a costly trade war with China? I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me on set today, Terry Jones, Associate Editor of Investors Business Daily, and Doug Altner, an analyst and instructor at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights. All right, gentlemen, the issue of China becoming a big campaign topic. Over the past few months, it seems the U.S. has been quietly escalating a trade war with the emerging superpower. Doug, I'll start with you. The president has filed a case against China with the W.T.O, accusing them of unfairly subsidizing their auto industry, and there's always this, are they manipulating their currency, or are they subsidizing their auto industry, are they dumping parts on our poor wind energy industry here? But the president seems to be getting tougher, and Romney has always been, throughout his campaign, a guy who's like, we got to get tough on China, we got to get tough on China. Ohio being a critical state, the auto parts industry being critical to Ohio, you can line it all up and see why they're doing this. So is there any merit to the suit in terms of what China's activities are? Or is this just, as we might suspect, political ball playing?
There's definitely elements of that, but I think these trade cases are really complicated. I think there's a number of things China is doing that it shouldn't be doing, but I think we really need to step back. There's too much of an us versus them mentality underlying all sorts of debates in international trade. It's as if what we're doing is playing a football game against China, and we're winning if we export more to China than we import from them, and China is winning if they are exporting more to us than we're importing from them, and so we have to make sure that the game is fair and there's a level playing field. And I think that's the complete wrong way to approach trade. This is a land of liberty. I think Americans, we should focus issues of trade in terms of individual liberty. If an American wants to, say, buy a shirt that's made in China, why should he be penalized for doing that? Because it's not made by one of our guys? Or say, if an American automobile company wants to import tires from China that the government is heavily subsidizing, then the government shouldn't be doing it. But suppose that they do, why should we prevent the auto company from taking advantage of this? It's not their fault that China is doing something that we think it shouldn't. But if anything, we should, they should be free to buy it.
Mm-hmm. Terry, any thoughts here in terms of the administration's handling of this issue?
No, not a one.
Not one?
Actually,
okay,
I do.
Doug, let's go back to
I do have a couple.
Okay.
One is, it's exactly what Doug said. I mean, this sort of neo-mercantilism that we have going here, where the only thing that counts is exports, whether you're exporting to another country. That's the way that you get wealthy, and that imports are somehow evil. Well, this is nonsense. I mean, we all know that imports create jobs too. And when somebody can make something cheaper than you can, it's a good way for you to cut your costs and let more people consume that product. And to go after China because they've been successful at exporting things to us just smacks to me of just raw politics, because they know this is not a bad
But is there something that China is doing that is intrinsically unfair? I mean, is all all's fair in love and war and trade? Is that the sort of what goes on, or are there things that you should say, hey, that's not right? I mean, the currency manipulation, or
they do manipulate their currency, and they do occasionally cheat on the rules. Unlike us, I mean, we would never cheat on rules. We would never, for instance, subsidize our green.
Wait a minute.
Okay, we do that. We wouldn't subsidize auto. Wait a minute, we do that too. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, never mind. But the other thing that's going on here is we run up $1 trillion in deficits every year, and we ask China to buy our debt. So well, we got $1 trillion deficit here. We'd like you to buy a couple $100 billion of this debt, and China says, well, okay, we will. What will we use for money? Well, it turns out it's money that they're recycling as a part of running trade surpluses with us.
Doug, the idea of, I want to take on Terry's joke there, his little jab at green jobs, because to a certain degree, the pursuit of green energy is part of this, because the U.S. aggressively pursues these tariffs on Chinese wind turbine makers because they're putting our poor guys out of business with their dumping their wares on us. So, do these tariffs, obviously we retaliate with tariffs and all this stuff, but it's all mixed up with this issue of we're trying to create an industry that doesn't exist with wind turbines and green energy. And then China says, well, if you want to create that industry, here's a bunch of parts for nothing that we'll dump on your market. how do you try to unwind and unwrap this knot? Because there are all these factors, none of which seem to be optimum. It just seems like no one is doing what they actually should be doing.
Yeah, the problem, I think, is people think we have free trade right now, but it's really managed trade. We impose tariffs on imports from China. China imposed tariffs on imports from America. I think the solution is to move towards freedom. We shouldn't penalize Americans for buying things from overseas, and say if it is the case where the Chinese government is doing something they shouldn't be doing by imposing tariffs on, say, American automobiles and auto parts, I think our government should champion freedom and say, you shouldn't be, our government should champion freedom and saying you shouldn't be putting tariffs on American exports. But what would be wrong is to then retaliate with our own tariffs, because that would be punishing individual Americans who were not responsible for what the Chinese government did by forcing them to pay higher prices, and I think that would be wrong.
Well, chasing our green jobs line here, obviously there was a debate this week, got a lot of attention, but Romney got in a great line at the debate on Wednesday. Let's take a look at what he said.
But you make a very good point, which is that the place you put your money just makes a pretty clear indication of where your heart is. You put $90 billion into green jobs. And I'm all in favor of green energy. $90 billion. That would have hired 2 million teachers. $90 billion. And these businesses, many of them have gone out of business. I think about half of them, of the ones that have been invested in, have gone out of business. A number of them happen to be owned by people who are contributors to your campaigns.
Whack! Smackdown! The other great part that wasn't part of that clip is when he said, because this came up about subsidizing the oil industry, and Obama was going, $2 billion a year, we subsidize the oil industry, and Romney said, you just did 50 years worth of subsidizing towards your particular industry, and you saw Obama sort of
big ouch.
looking down, and you could feel the ouch coming back there. What do you think of, it's a great line by Romney, but do you think Romney's going to do anything different in terms of this kind of sort of cronyism and directed capitalism? We choose this industry to do well.
I'd like to say no, he won't, but I fear in my heart of hearts that once president and the pressures are applied, that he will do perhaps not as much as Obama, but will probably do something along those lines. It's one of the distressing elements of our society that we elect presidents, and presidents tend to expand the size of government, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. You can only hope that the Republican will expand it more slowly than the Democrat.
That's the only hope we have these days, is to lower the rate of expansion. That's where we've gotten to. In conjunction with some of these statements that Romney has made on China, the presidential hopeful has also released this TV ad.
Under Obama, we've lost over 500,000 manufacturing jobs. And for the first time, China is beating us. 7 times Obama could have stopped China's cheating. 7 times he refused.
It's time to stand up to the cheaters and make sure we protect jobs for the American people.
Doug, following up on your point, you're saying that if China is cheating, the wrong answer is to punish. But then how do you the world is full of people, they're not going to respond to a principled argument about free trade. China might go like, screw you, we're going to do what we're going to do. Why is the answer, I'm just chasing you down a little bit, why is the answer not to respond at all? Just be like, okay, screw us, we stand on principle.
Well, because we can't control what China does at the end, so we can't say, oh, if only there was some way to manipulate them. But any kind of response amounts to punishing Americans. So if we start retaliating with tariffs on Chinese imports, that's like saying to the Americans who want to buy them, it doesn't matter that you had nothing to do with the Chinese policies that we object to, you're now going to be punished because you have to pay higher tariffs. I think that's wrong. We shouldn't be approaching trade policy this way. And even this ad, I think it speaks to the whole us versus them mentality that I mentioned. Like, sure, there are things China's doing it shouldn't be doing. There are things the U.S. is doing I think it shouldn't be doing. But we shouldn't present it as like, look, now more manufacturing is done in China than America, because it could be that's for legitimate reasons of comparative advantage, or it could be because of
Anyone
trade.
Who enjoys an
plots,
iPhone is enjoying it because they can build it in China for less, for less money.
So it shouldn't be about where the jobs are. It should be about, are we free to trade or not?
I think the best line about China I heard recently was that guy. He did a fantastic Obama impression, this comedian. He passed away, actually, recently at a young age. He said he was doing an Obama speech, and he said, manufacturing is coming back to America. You know those tags that say made in China? We make those. All right, so that's all the time we have for the discussion. For Terry and Doug, I'm Allen Barton, and you've been watching Front Page.